Well, for more on this story, we have reached Michael Bociurkiw, who is in Odesa, Ukraine. He is a global affairs analyst and a senior fellow with the Atlantic Council. Michael, good to speak with you. It's been a few weeks since we've spoken.
Mm-hmm. Correct. Yes, it has. Yeah.
Well, let me begin before we get to the bigger stories of the day. You're in Odesa. We know that a number of cities have been targeted this weekend by the Russians. How are the folks in Odesa faring?
Yeah, Natasha, so Odesa was one of the many cities hit by the most recent wave of missile strikes. Critical infrastructure was hit. But, you know, even if the missiles don't hit Odesa, we have a shared energy power distribution system here in Ukraine. So damage in one area of Ukraine will affect other places here. But yeah, I mean, you know, it's so sad because just 2 days ago, people were rejoicing in streetlights because they came back and people could walk normally along the streets here. And now the streets are pretty much back in darkness again because of the missile strikes. And it's tough. It's very tough for small and medium-sized businesses. Bakeries, for example, I noticed today that some bakeries couldn't even bake bread because they need electricity for that. So day-to-day life is very disruptive. And you can see in that intersection, there's no functioning traffic lights, making it very dangerous for both car drivers and passengers.
What's the sense you're getting on the ground, Michael? Because, you know, for months, the story has been, look at the power of the Ukrainian military. Look at their resilience. They've been pushing the Russians back and back and back. But really, since New Year's weekend, we've seen the Russian assault be so intense. We saw that barrage of bombardment on New Year's weekend. We've seen them take Soledar. While it's not particularly significant for the Ukrainians, it's hugely symbolic for the Russians to gain that city. And now today, with the leveling of all of these communities and a residential property, are we seeing that tug of war and Russia now back again on top?
Well, sadly, at the end of the day, what we're seeing when we thought we saw the basement of Russian inhumanity, they go ahead and surprise us. In fact, just before I came on air with you, I was checking the Ukrainian telegram channels, and in Kherson, which was, of course, taken back by the Ukrainians, the Russians have struck an office where the Red Cross operates. Now, this is supposed to be a no-go zone for everybody, but they struck that. The strike on the Dnipro residential complex, not only did it shake Ukrainians to the core, there's absolutely horror both here in Ukraine as well as Ukrainians overseas. But what is very worrisome, Natasha, with that particular strike, aside from what Chris said, the size of the weapon, is apparently it took a trajectory where the air defense systems or the air raid alarms couldn't detect it. Now, that's very scary. And by the way, it was the same type of missile, I'm told, that struck that shopping center in Kiev near the beginning of the war. So, you know, Ukraine is getting these air defense systems. It's going to get that system that Canada is buying from the U.S. as well, which is a very welcome development. But it almost seems like the Russians are surprising everybody at every corner, at every turn, and using these new tactics. We didn't expect for a few months ago those Iranian drones to come onto the scene, but that's what's happening. On the battlefield, quickly, Ukrainians are doing an amazing job, as you said. I think Soledar is still not decided who is actually in control. But the difference between the Ukrainians and the Russians is the Russians are throwing wave after wave of men towards the front line. And hundreds and hundreds are dying apparently every day. So it's just a horrible scene.
Let's talk about the support that the Ukrainians continue to get from the Western world. So the British government has agreed to send over these heavy Challenger tanks. Mm-hmm. What kind of support would that offer that wasn't previously there? How significant is this to the war effort?
Well, there are two things here. One is on the military and the other is on the diplomatic side. So on the military side, I mean, this is an incredible fighting machine. It's a post-Cold War fourth generation tank, 70 tons. It has fire and thermal control systems. So it's almost invincible on the battlefield. It will bring the Ukrainians closer to the front line and be able to strike with a heck of a lot more precision and also defend themselves better. Now, on the diplomatic side, despite the political changes in the United Kingdom, the one thing they did get right was the Ukraine response from the beginning. So now with this decision to send these tanks, and it's not an easy feat, they are heavy, it'll take a lot of logistics, but also it sends a diplomatic message to European countries. Now is the time to grow some spine, give Ukraine more muscle in the form of tanks and fighting vehicles. So the hope there is that European countries, for example, Poland, will be able to send those German Leopard tanks as well to Ukraine, because 12 is a big number, of course, for these Challenger 2 tanks, but they need dozens, hundreds of tanks to really make a difference on the battlefield. So hopefully, again, this will persuade European countries to go ahead, especially Germany, to give Ukraine those vital fighting tanks.
Well, even on that front, you mentioned Poland. Poland has said it would have to negotiate with Germany to send over their tanks. And Germany has said even if we were going to send the tanks, they won't be ready to send over until 2024, meaning a whole year at least before Ukraine would receive them. In between now and then, does Ukraine have what it needs to maintain its borders?
No, it doesn't. And the Ukrainian officials make that clear, is this is exactly what they need, along with the air defense systems to repel those incoming Russian missiles. I think if it hasn't got through the heads of Western leaders that they have to act now, actually they should have acted earlier. I don't know what will, because this war is spilling over Ukraine's borders. Just yesterday, missile fragments were found nearby over the border in Moldova. Rocket fragments have fallen in Poland. On top of that, of course, you have Putin's weaponization of migration, energy, food, and now winter. So all of Europe is affected. That strike on Dnipro will probably send more asylum seekers into neighboring countries, putting more pressure on systems there. So they have to act quickly. Otherwise, this is going to become much, much more their problem as well.
Okay, Michael Bociurkiw in Odesa, Ukraine. Thank you so much for your time.
My pleasure.